Okay, welcome back to the PSL2 season in review. Today we're covering Elijah Merchant's Glittering Insects. They finished the season with a 3-11 record, tying for the worst record, but winning out in game differential, putting him at seventh place in the league at the end of it. He had a draft consisting of Volcarona, Starmie, um, Scrafty, Metagross, Jellicent, Haxorus, Frostlass, Cabalion, Celebi, and Aerodactyl, and the big acquisition in the trade market, Terrakion. Um, so, first impressions on his roster from the outset.
Well, it's a great roster. I really like his team a lot. And to be honest, I think if I had Elijah's exact team, I would have a similar record to what I have right now.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of like overall quality, this is one of the better rosters that we've seen in the league. Um, because it doesn't really lack anything. It has almost all of the types. There's a couple weaknesses that could be easily remedied and actually have since the regular season. But for the most part, like you have really good versatile mons. You have good setup sweepers, good walls. Um, uh, and I have very few complaints about the roster. Um, it was started with a first pick Volcarona and then built around in a pretty
Logical way.
competent
And then
logical
he
way.
also pulled off the greatest fleece in PSL history.
Yeah, yeah, it's got to take the cake at this point. Um, that,
Auto-made Mindshot work, but
yeah,
yeah, Terrakion's a lot better
a lot better. And then
than
he
Tangrowth
didn't really make effective use of the tank growth that he
is.
got for it. So, you know, that is what it is, and we'll cover it more when we get to him in the
Yeah.
reviews. But for now, let's stay on Elijah and see how he got off to a pretty rough start.
Yeah, the week one game against me is actually so unlucky that he didn't
Yeah,
win. That's one
yeah,
thing I will say straight up.
yeah,
If that Hydro Pump didn't miss on my Chansey very early on in the game, I actually had
yeah.
no answer to start me.
um, it's it's not it's not I'd say one of Elijah's major flaws, but there's a theme of hacks in his season. You know, everyone gets lucky and everyone gets hacked sometimes, but uh, for some people it just happens to stick out a bit more than others. Um, but yeah, obviously there's a lot of these games, and honestly, this is one of the reviews that I've been looking forward to more than anyone's because well, he beat me, so I have to get my licks in back. I have to get my get back, and there's there's scarcely been we saw a loss streak with Elijah that surpassed even the likes of Borpamon, which is truly impressive. But I guess you could flip that the other way and say that it's impressive that Elijah didn't quit and drop out
And
after the
then
losses
in
he
the
suffered.
final moments of the season, he
Yeah,
clutches the seventh
yeah.
place. What an epic story!
um, but yeah, there's a lot of blunders here in this. Like I'm pretty sure it was 0-9, and then he got his first win at 1-9. I could be misremembering slightly, but it was 0-9 for sure.
Definitely lost
At
every game in
least,
the first round robin.
yeah. Um, in that first round robin, there were a lot of just real head scratchers, man. Game two, there's the Scarf Dragon Dance Haxorus. There's also in game three an HP Ice Terrakion. Um,
That's actually not as bad as it sounds.
I
I
I
will
just
say he didn't
I don't
need
know
for
his
that.
base special attack, but I feel like there might be better options for the Garchomp
Well, the thing,
than
so the thing, okay, I'll defend it on an all-out attacking uh Terrakion. So just four attacks, right? You take close combat and Stone Edge, the stabs, they're
yeah,
no brainer.
yeah,
And then the other moves are sort of like debatable, and you pick generally two of the three of X Scissor, HP Ice, and Quick Attack. And it
yeah.
just sort of
Okay.
depends on what your team needs there. So I don't hate the HP Ice, but I don't think it was used. I mean, if it's a Swords Dance
He clicked it on
Garchomp,
Garchomp.
Back to Yachi.
They just had Yachi, yeah.
It was the right move. It was a
Yeah.
quick attack HP ice angle, but
Just didn't
I just
hit.
wouldn't be
Just didn't
leaving
hit.
Brachion in against Garchomp.
Yeah. We could do a whole segment of this, to be honest. Like there's there's the bulk up Scrafty in game 4
With
against
Toxic,
Auden. Yeah, with Toxic. Just chilling. You don't need attacking moves. You got Drain Punch. There's
yeah, I think there was like I think it was against Rotom. He was like plus 4 or something,
yeah.
and it was like he could either
Toxic.
Toxic or Drain
Yeah.
Punch the Rotom, and he Toxic it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
That
crazy.
was impressive. And then those are the main ones that stood out to me. So obviously a lot of head scratchers in the first round robin. I think there's like we could go into, and I would like look, I got we could go into every single match and all the blunders, but I feel like that would just be
Yeah,
cruel. Um,
it
I
would
think
be
if I
like
were to I think if I were to sum it all up, um, I'd say there were a few glaring weaknesses in the first round. A lot of dragon weakness because I mean dragons are just strong as fuck, and you need a good steel type if you're gonna stand a chance. Now he had Metagross. Metagross kind of folds to Garchomp. Um,
yeah.
so that's one of the best dragons or the toughest dragons to watch out for. But it's good into the Lottie twins, and it's good into some of the other ones. I don't know if it has EQ, it's gonna give you a tough time.
It can probably tank a EQ from Mence and Knight from
Yeah,
full, and
yeah.
then retaliate
Ice
with
punch
Ice
it.
Punch.
Yeah,
But
and then BP if it doesn't kill. I don't even know
at
if.
worst, it's a switch in, and
Yeah,
like maybe you
yeah,
can like sort of maneuver it so that you can switch in another Pokemon who actually does
yeah,
answer it. So that's like the idea of even though it's not like the best, it still has utility versus those Pokemon.
yeah. And in a couple of other games, the lack of a ground type really gave him an outstanding electric weakness that allowed some pretty mediocre mons that just happen to be electric types really get off versus him. Like a Magnezone in a game with nothing to trap did a lot of work, just because there's nothing to take its Volt Switch as well. It just got free momentum and did a chunk, and then a Jolteon from the Nimbasa Shock just like put up like fucking Michael Jordan numbers in one game, like just because there was no switching. It was just you couldn't do
Hey
anything
man,
about it.
I actually think that Jolteon's an underrated Pokemon in draft leagues.
Yeah, I
Probably like it's like clearly not an OU Mon, but
yeah.
it's not bad. It's not a bad electric type. It is fast
If you
and
need
it is
an electric type is a very good type to have from this generation onward. So yeah, no, I agree.
even on
Um,
this, yeah. Every generation really. Electric type is just it's a very
yeah,
good attacking type. The
yeah,
only issue is the ground immunity.
yeah. So those are the two big draft weaknesses, and I guess it'll remain to be seen in the playoffs if the Metagross is able to be used effectively to deal with the dragon types. You don't have like priority ice shard to deal with them. I mean, you do have Frostlass, but it's not like that's not killing anything. Um, and then
Uh,
see how well the newly acquired Flygon does as to give his team a little bit of punch and a switch into those electric types. So um, that
we'll
kind
say
of
that Flygon still gets outsped and HP iced.
yeah.
Is a small issue. But
Well, if it's not like it could be specs. I feel like that's the most common Jolteon set.
I guess if it's Specs Jolteon. I mean, I think that you can run Specs Jolteon, but fundamentally it's like a hyper offense Pokemon, so running things like Expert Belt and Life
Yeah.
Orb are still going to be, I think, very powerful. It just kind of
Okay.
you don't need to run them
I
against.
guess outside of like a rain core with the anyway, we're getting off track.
Yeah,
Were there any do you want to move on to the wins now because I feel like the wins there's you had some thoughts about the wins.
yeah. I think that for my money, the final week game between Elijah and Auden is one of the worst games of Pokemon I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I can't argue. against it. I think it is an outstanding contender for the worst game of the season at the very least. Um,
Yeah.
there's just I mean I watched it live and it's still fresh in my memory. I was sitting there in the call with everyone else just screaming into my mic, please click rapid spin, hoping against hope that Elijah would hear me through the
Oh,
deafen.
that's the Max game though, right?
Oh, my fault. Wait, was it?
That is a bit terrible game too,
That's a
but
really bad game. They're both
that's a
really
real,
bad games.
but the one against Auden is like
I
insane.
yeah. That's the one where
Max
he
makes
where
some good moves at least
sure.
against Elijah, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's some decent piloting going on at times,
Yeah.
but in the Elijah Auden match, it's just like two just like I don't know, like 6-year-olds with like great swords trying to fight and like they're just like cutting off their own limbs. Like I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a pretty
Um
grisly image, but it's sort of what it reminds me of, I guess.
I I just I remember the game now. I'm clicking through the replay and it's like I I just don't think I don't know if they were like considering what their opponent would do. Like they're just kind of making plays like
Yeah.
just like in a vacuum. I don't know. It's hard to know what's going on. When you watch this replay.
Yeah, it's a crazy one. And Elijah, I'm just gonna be like straight up. The reason you won this game is because you missed the hydro pump against me. It was karma because you should have lost that game for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And you
And
get it back threefold, so I guess it was worth it in the end. Because
yeah,
there was that was just and even in the scenarios where he got lucky, the correct play wasn't even always or not correct, but the best play wasn't even always made. It was just baffling.
it was like what, like I don't know, 35 turns, and like potentially each side had 9 or 10 like just like blunders.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was wild. And there
Just
was also like
completely
one
red.
turn. Oh yeah, you go. I have a
I
joke.
was just saying like completely red on the like on the chess
Yeah,
computer and analysis like
yeah, the double question mark, like it's
yeah.
the blunder. Um, and there's this one turn where I forget what the two moves are, but like Auden has Fairthorn in and Elijah has someone in, and like both moves whiff, and it's just like that's just like poetic. It's like
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
what's
I
happening.
said great turn. And then they stayed in and clicked the same move again, knowing with both of them. And
Yeah.
that's just beautiful. I do think it would be unfair to go through this whole season review without talking about the win. I mean, the the elephant in the room is my loss. You know, I it ruined my perfect season. You know, but I'm not gonna let it get to me. It was a mistake of the from the team builder. You know, I really had no answer for the Scrafty. Um, and I actually later at the end of the game found out I did have an answer for that Scrafty the whole time, and I just didn't didn't know. I thought it would be speed invested with Dragon Dance, but I guess it was the rare bulky Dragon Dance Scrafty that my
Yeah.
Hydreigon could have outsped at any point and clicked Draco Meteor and killed. But
Yeah. I
my
mean,
bad
it's
for
a
not
fair
knowing.
assumption. That's
Yeah,
all I'll say. And
yeah,
then the Elijah had some good luck
with the shed skin
with the shed
procs.
shell procs,
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean it was brutal.
but the point is, Pokemon
I
happens,
don't think
and you,
anyone blames you for that game because that was genuinely a
yeah,
really great tech,
yeah,
except for the like the no speed investment. The no speed investment is complete nonsense. Like it should be speed invested, you know, like
yeah, yeah,
so that Scarvers can't answer it.
yeah,
But yeah, that was great tech by you, Elijah. Easily your play of the season, your game of the season,
yeah.
and you know that puts you in rarefied air. I myself, who like over the course of PSL, if we take the regular season in account, like only the regular season, not the playoffs, I have a very similar win rate to Dean. I just have 2 losses.
Oh, the playoffs doesn't affect it.
Yeah,
It's still zero.
yeah, well, right. My win rate is the same
Oh,
as yours. I've never beaten you though, not a single
yeah,
game.
yeah.
So a single game versus Dean is, I think, puts you in
There's 3
just
people
3
who've beaten
people.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just 3 people in the whole league. So wear with
um.
pride. Wear with
Yeah.
pride, Elijah.
Yeah. But there's just so many. Now that I got that game out of the way, I can just talk about like just the general uh tactical errors that were made in most games outside of team building, which I think, to be fair, I don't think I think Elijah improved over the course of the season in the sense in a strategical sense. Like he constructed better teams. Like you said, he got a win over me basically entirely from the team builder. Um,
Yeah.
and he stopped making just wrong clicks in the team builder with the scarf dragon dance and shit like that. Um, they kind of get more normalized and they make a bit more sense. It's just that the tactical plays in game don't really come to meet that level of improvement.
Yeah. I I think that you have improved in some ways, certainly, Elijah. But in terms of when you're in the game and when you're trying to find the right move, you still sort of make these short term tactical sort of errors. And so, what I mean when I say tactical, Dean and I sort of talked about a definition of this. And when I say tactical, what I'm thinking of is like a 2 to 5 move sequence, even a 1 move sequence at times. Just like 1 move, it could kind of be a tactic. But whereas when you talk about strategic, we're more thinking about the big like 40 turn plan. Like how are you going to apply pressure? Like what points are you going to apply pressure? How are you going to take the advantage? How, if your opponent gets a good position, will you work to claw your way out of it? Um, those are the things that you definitely have improved on.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and like you said, it's reflected in just a much better comps throughout the end of the season. But you still do a lot of just leaving your Pokemon in on moves that will kill them. You do a lot of
coverage moves, to be fair, that you just aren't aware of, but that's just a lack of game knowledge. That's not
yeah.
that's something you need to fix. Sorry, go ahead.
Usually though, it's like the opposing Pokemon stab, and it's like their strong stab move, and so I don't know that like that is like even a big argument when it, and this is true of even Daniel and even Autumn. They like, I think that they're some of the biggest perpetrators of this, where it's just like, what, that guy has a strong stab move that he can click, and then he clicks it.
Yeah, I have a great example of this in game 9 of the season for him versus the Darth Hemorrhoids. Um, there's a Jellicent in, Gengar comes in, the Jellicent stays in, takes a Shadow Ball. Then the switch in is Starmie to the Shadow Ball, which gets brought down to its sash, and then dies again. It's just like a lot of examples of just taking a lot of unnecessary damage by not correctly identifying the switch on, like, and not, I guess, at a broader scale, not analyzing the situation and seeing your way out of it. We've talked about like identifying your win conditions. I always emphasize this whenever I'm reviewing with anyone, is that you need to know how you're going to win the game. And like, this can start in the team builder. This can start even on the grandest of scales with your draft, where you draft Volcarona with the first pick. It's the best setup, one of the best setup sweepers in the tier.
I would
And
say the best.
yeah,
Like once
and
it gets
and
set up, it's just gonna
yeah,
be just
and it has so many coverage options, but you need to enable that. You need to figure out, okay, what stops this? Rocks, obviously, and big special walls. So you get a great physical wall breaker with Terrakion and the best spinner support for it and Starmie. Great. You have an awesome draft. You have a very clear identity and you know what you need to do to win most of your games, except for like the rare occasion where you have something that still counters that your Volcarona.
Plus, you
You
have
just have to
Celebi to enable those two Pokemon.
yeah, yeah, it keeps going.
It's so
And the where the stops though is in the tactical, where you just like as soon as you click accept on the challenge, you forget what you're doing there. You forget what you're trying to get, what the main goal of your team is. And just like this sequence where you're in one of your last games versus Max, game 13, where you're in with Starmie and you have two Pokemon left and he has four, and one of them is Volcarona, and the rocks are on your field, and you need to get rid of the rocks to be able to have a chance at winning this game. You need your Volcarona to come in and set up and get rid of that Pokemon advantage. But you just leave, and it's in versus something that can't even kill it very very easily. You just
it has
it's
no
a
threat on Starmie, and Napoleon has to get like 2 crits in a row to kill
yeah.
Starmie.
So it's just the freest rapid spin ever. It's a no brainer move, and somehow it doesn't get clicked for like almost 10 turns. There's it's just like I get that the timer is stressful and whatnot, and it's easy to get lost in the haze of battle, but you got to take a minute. The time's there for a reason. You have to sit there and be like, okay, what are my outs? How do they win? How do I win? It's that simple. And just going to those three questions or some form of them in the middle of a game can help you recenter yourself and figure out what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah.
That's
The
how I sorry, one more thing. I've
you
been in a lot of holes before. Like in my last game versus Ethan. I just like I'm not just gonna start clicking random buttons though. I'm gonna say, hey, how can I still win this game even though it's 2-4? Or versus Auden in the first game of the season, even though it's like 2-5.
yeah
You just have to know what you can do and try it.
yeah the you need to get everything out of your head in those moments, and you need to think, like actually be thinking about things, because this is something that Daniel does a lot, where he'll just sit there and like pause because essentially he's like afraid to make a move. Like he's
Yeah.
not, because it might be a mistake, right? It's okay to make mistakes, but don't just lose your time, which is a resource, uh, sitting there being afraid to make a move. Because at the end of the day, uh, that doesn't help you. Like that just
Yeah.
hurts you, right? You're just losing a precious resource. That being said, it's essentially impossible to run out of time with the 15-second increment, but you know, it.
It's been done before. And Daniel was kind of an example of the other end of the extreme that you don't want to veer towards, where you'll face analysis paralysis and just um kind of run yourself into the ground. But use the time while you have it. Um,
I don't even think it's analysis paralysis. I think it's literally just like it's like he's done all the analysis and it's a literal fear. That's
yeah,
how I would assess it.
yeah. Um,
There's no analyzing being done.
true. Do you have any more notes on any of the regular season games?
I think you might be overrating Scrafty now, Elijah. And I don't think you should be bringing that Pokemon in the vast majority of matchups. Um, it did get you a really clutch win versus Dean, but that type of sweep is much more difficult against a team like Max's, for example, where you brought Scrafty, and Scrafty's not all that good, like really at all. It's
Yeah,
like it has no threat onto any of his Pokemon except for like Kyurem, and even Kyurem, it just gets out by and then one shot by.
yeah. You have to have a dance up and be speed invested, by the way.
Yeah.
And like, um, yeah, and I can guarantee it's not going to happen against me again. So, like,
Well, I'll try my best to stop Elijah in round one.
yeah.
So
Speaking of the playoffs, do you have what?
I'm genuinely scared, Elijah. Your team
Yeah,
is, I think, awesome. Like
yeah,
straight up. The more I think about it, the more I like your draft than Daniel's, and I think that Daniel probably it still has a very good draft with a lot of enticing Pokemon, whereas you don't quite have the same
top end.
kind of Yeah, you don't have Latios.
Yeah,
Yeah. You don't have the star power, quite the same star power, but you have just like a lot of stars, not quite the level of Latios, who also really fit together super well.
yeah,
And I think that if you can start harnessing the power of your team, you could upset me in round one. I think it's very possible. When I scrim against Dean, it is typically about 50-50. With if not a slight advantage to your team, like with a good pilot. So bring your A game, and you can
yeah,
win. That's all I have to say.
yeah. And I think like a lot of it, I've said this for almost every review, but just playing more games can get you the experience you need. Playing more games with your team, make a conscious effort to get Volcarona sweeps because that's the best way. That's the most easy way for your team to win. I think you'll find if you just try to play towards it.
Yeah, you something that I would encourage you to scrim. Experiment with ways to get hazards up early and deny hazards from the opponent. It's not the biggest deal if you can't deny them because of the Starmie, but if you can get your own hazards and keep hazards off the field, then all of a sudden, a lot of the time, Volcarona is only ever going to need one Quiver Dance to sweep.
Yeah,
And that's an important thing to understand is, yes, it's good. And you do this a lot. You Quiver Dance too much on Volcarona. I think there was a great example where you set up one Quiver Dance, Daniel switches into Darmanitan, and then if you had rocks, you probably could have O-code with Psychic, but you didn't have rocks, and then you leave it in to Quiver Dance again, and then just let it die to Darmanitan Blitz, Flare Blitz, because that's something that you got to realize your opponent's threats, right? You can't just be letting your opponent press one move that kills your Pokemon. That's just not
yeah.
an acceptable turn, generally speaking.
And this is
Depends on
just
attacking, but
yeah, right.
higher level.
Um, this is an example of just misuse of setup mons, which I think is just like a widespread disease in the league. It's really hard for people to make effective use of them. I find on the whole, um, there have been a couple of sweeps, mostly from the Taurean shields, but like other than that, it's really rare that you'll see a setup mon played correctly. Um, and that's really important because your setup mon's your best guy. Um, you got to know when you can
I
get
mean,
a quiver
Terrakion a pretty
dance.
good guy too, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's close.
Um, but yeah, you got to know when you can click a quiver dance, what coverage to bring for each team. Look at a type chart, you know, um, and don't bring useless bullshit like Roost. I think,
Yeah, don't take special attacking Jocelyn with Curse Body.
which,
That's a recurring set that you bring. That is just the craziest thing ever, man.
there's also like the Frostlass attacking lead. Um, like just no hazard set, just fucking raw shadow balls turn one. Like
They got taunt. Come on. It was like
too dumb.
I don't remember, but it was like Blizzard, Shadow Ball,
Blizzard. Yeah.
taunt. Yeah, it's an ice game, not Blizzard, for the record.
Um
Simple mathematics will tell
I
you that
mean,
on average, Ice Beam will do more damage.
yeah, I have been the loudest proponent of the use the inaccurate moves, but Blizzard's not the one. Not the
Yeah,
one to be using.
Hydro Pump. Also, you need to understand there's like trade-offs between like Fire Blast and Flamethrower, and so it sort of depends more on your needs, right? So sometimes Hydro Pump Fire Blast is better. Sometimes Flamethrower is better, and it's sort of like understanding critical damage checks where it's like, okay, Fire Blast will OHKO this mon with +1 in special attack, but uh, Flamethrower won't. So it's like understanding like specific things, and there's a lot of scenarios where people err on the side of the weaker moves. I think a good example of a Pokemon that you should definitely always be taking the stronger option on is Starmie, because she actually doesn't have the best attacking stats, and without the extra base power from Hydro Pump, uh, her damage is severely lacking on her primary water stab.
Yeah. That doesn't apply to Thunder and Thunderbolt because they are coverage moves. You don't usually need the strong base, and sometimes even people do bring Thunder on Starmie. But it's mostly about the stab. That's the one that matters the most.
I think that specifically Blizzard and Ice Beam is like the one that
Well,
is most clear of like never take Blizzard unless you have Hail.
yeah,
Uh, whereas, because even then, I do see some arguments for Thunder over Thunderbolt,
yeah,
particularly like obviously if you're in rain. But the thing about the thing about Thunder is that it hits bounce and it
yeah,
hits fly, which
yeah,
sometimes are moves.
yeah.
And the 30% electric
It has a 30%
paralysis.
paralysis chance. It's used on bullshit Jirachi for that reason sometimes. But yeah. Uh we're getting a little we're past 30 minutes on this one. Is
Yeah.
there is there any more notes that any big bullet points that we want to hit on with the glittering insects?
Just that we're proud of you for sticking it through,
Yeah.
Elijah.
Yeah. No, it is impressive because as I mentioned before, Pokemon was long gone by this point. And I it goes to show that it wasn't for nothing when you end 7th and not 8th.
Yeah.
So good job. And I'm looking forward to see how you play in the playoffs and in future seasons.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and I think next time I want to go to Auto. Let's do the
We
Darth
already did
Hemorrhoids
Auden, I
next.
thought.
Auto.
Oh,
Sorry.
Auto. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Auto.
Yeah, let's do that.